Hello, SGD, Sacred Geometry Decoded. This will be part 3 in a series where I'm looking at Hermes Trismegistus or Corpus Hermeticum and everything that surrounds it and really trying to untie this knot and doing it as much with available sources. So Gnosticism, Neoplatonism, Hermeticism, and also these earlier definitions of the Illuminati, not the Iamblichus version, but like the Alumbrades and these other heretical groups before the internet's celebrity Illuminati sort of come around. So it's really big. So the Corpus Hermeticum or Hermetica was reintroduced to Europe, let's call it, by Cosimo de Medici. Well, he commissioned Leonardo di Pistoia, to go and collect ancient books and bring them back to Florence. And the Corpus Hermetica that's most known and talked about now was then translated by Marsilio Ficino, published 1471. I'll put that link up again. In the first episode I talked about some criticisms of that translation and that there was a lot of muddling in there, but also what exactly is the Corpus Hermetica. Now if you look up Emerald Tablet, Hermes Trismegistus, you'll see various, I would say more mystical or sensationalized or idealized versions of them. But we'll just go through and we'll see that there is a link between this general area surrounding Hermes and Mercury, and it can be actually described in the ancient texts. So this is one of the typical illustrations. Now it's Mercurius Trismegistus, Hermes Mercurius Trismegistus. Hermes is the Greek god of knowledge, science, weights and measures, commerce. Mercurius, is the Roman equivalent of that. So we saw in the floor of Siena Cathedral where we have Hermes Mercurius Trismegistus, and the influence of Neoplatonic, Gnostic, Hermetic, and other influences on various heretical sects of Christianity, and how it was suppressed by not just the Roman Church, but also the Eastern Church, especially through Byzantium or Constantinople. So Mercurius Trismegistus, or Hermes Mercurius Trismegistus, again with the caduceus, the wand, which also translates to measuring rod. These are the gods of knowledge in ancient Greek and ancient Roman. Mercury was the god of knowledge, science, weights and measures, navigation, commerce, and in Greek, Hermes was the god of knowledge, science, botany, medicine, weights and measures, the gods of science. This can be directly connected to the aspects of Thoth in ancient Egypt, and it's often said that Hermes Trismegistus is Thoth. We'll look at that in this next couple of episodes. So a very important person was Saint Clement of Alexandria, Bishop of Alexandria. For instance, in 200 AD, he witnessed priests and priestesses of Hermes, as he called it, or Thoth, parading with their 42 sacred books. That's important because Saint Clement of Alexandria was prominent in the suppression of the Gnostic and Neoplatonic movements, which were centered around Alexandria. So, for instance, the Valentinian communities, or the schools of Valentinus, were described as Gnostic. So I'll get more into what is Gnosticism, Neoplatonic schools, Cathars, and these other heretical groups. But this is a later Gnostics, particular Valentinus, developed a complex doctrine based on all these concepts and held together by the current influence of Neoplatonism. Gnosticism, Neoplatonism, again, that's a very complex thing, hard to describe in short terms. We'll get to that in future episodes. Now I would like to reference a book by a very famous Iamblichus. He was a Neoplatonist mathematician, and he established an academy very close to Antioch. Mathematician, but also was above the Platonic academies, which is different from Neoplatonic, but Plato and Neoplatonism are different, similar but different. But what was written above the Platonic academies was, "Let no one ignorant of geometry enter my door." Very similar to the Pythagorean schools and Pythagorean academies. And so geometry, math, music, arithmetic, astronomy are all things linked to Plato, Eudoxus, Democritus, all of these greats, the important figures surrounding there. Now this is chapter 1 of Iamblichus on the mysteries, so mystery schools of the Egyptians, Chaldeans and Assyrians. Chaldeans is, you could just exchange that for Babylonians, or just that twin rivers. Essentially Babylonians who were the heirs of the Sumerians and these similar cultures. And so chapter 1, Iamblichus on the mysteries, the answer to the preceptor, Porphyry, we'll get to that in a moment. But chapter 1, Hermes, the god who presides over language, was formerly very properly considered as common to all priests, and this passage as well. Hence our ancestors dedicated the inventions of their wisdom to this deity, inscribing all their own writings with the name of Hermes. We'll examine that. This is very, very important text. Now he also references, just underneath there, Pythagoras, but also Plato and Eudoxus are very important, because Plato, famous for his philosophy such as in the Republic, and his other writings including surrounding Atlantis and these other allegories, I would call them, but let's put that to the side. Plato was a geometrician as well. Eudoxus was a very famous astronomer. Strabo, in his geographies as he travels through, he says, however, at Heliopolis, the houses of the priests of the schools of Plato and Eudoxus were pointed out to us. Heliopolis, the ancient centre of learning, record-keeping in ancient Egypt. The schools of Plato and Eudoxus were pointed out to us. Well, that's the schools of geometry and astronomy. For Eudoxus went up to that place with Plato, and they both passed 13 years with the priests. Since these priests excelled in their knowledge of the heavenly bodies, it goes on to talk, and their philosophy. This was a school, essentially the quadrivium and the trivium, but music, geometry, astronomy, arithmetic, the hard sciences in that sense. And Plato and Eudoxus and these Greek writers, Greco-Roman people, learnt primarily through Heliopolis and then the Library of Alexandria. Platonic Solids, that's geometry linked to Plato, how his philosophy was based on observing the natural world. So they would look at the laws of the stars and the heavens, the laws of geometry and math, and formed a philosophy based around there. These are essentially the laws of the divine, however you want to put it, the laws of the creator. These are the laws of God. 1 + 1 = 2. You can't philosophize your way out of it. And so if you build a philosophy on top of that, this is essentially what was happening in this sense with all these various competing philosophies. They had a common origin, that they were students of the sciences and based their ideas on that. I'll put a playlist in the description if you want to make Platonic Solids with a bit of paper, compass and straight edge, bit of glue and sticky tape. I'll also link this video, Ancient Knowledge, the transfer of Egypt-Chaldea to the Greco-Romans, because the Roman writers, including Herodotus, explicitly say that they learnt through the Egyptians and Chaldeans things like geometry, timekeeping, the sciences in general, and also a playlist to a series on Heliopolis, which relates to Seshat, the goddess of geometry, astronomy, etc. Back to Iamblichus on the mysteries and the important opening, chapter 1, how he opens. Hermes, first word there. Hermes, the god who presides over language. And this is a nice quote from Kurt Gödel. The more I think about language, the more it amazes me that people ever understood each other at all. And you might think about the story of the Tower of Babel in that sense, and how important language is in. So you have the Quadrivium, which is the sciences, but in the several liberal arts you also have the trivium, logic, grammar and rhetoric, which are more philosophical, but like rhetoric, how to speak and how to explain your argument. Same essentially with grammar, and logic, how to arrange your arguments. So I focus on the quadrivium, but the trivium are very important because that's about how you transmit your information and how you present your information and make your arguments. Very important in especially the legal term, like debating clubs as well. It's not just about sort of what it's being able to present it and establish those principles. But Hermes. Okay, the Egyptian gods of astronomy, writing, math, geometry, botany, medicine, weights and measures, or just science in general. That's Thoth and Seshat. Seshat's been largely forgotten about, but Thoth taught writing to humanity, but Seshat invented writing. Now, I should have included Nuwa and Fu Hsi. These actually, I'll just stop for a moment. Since I'm going to be mentioning the connection, especially with Jesuits in regards to Neoplatonism, Hermeticism, etc., and these links, I want to just bring up, you can just do a search in regards to Figurism. Figurism was an intellectual movement of Jesuit missionaries in China at the end of the 17th, beginning of the 18th century, whose participants viewed the I Ching as a prophetic book containing the mysteries of Christianity and prioritizing working with the Qing Emperor rather than with the literati of China. Now, I'd recommend go have a look at Figurism because they're going to include the connections to Nuwa and Fu Hsi. So these are some images of Nuwa and Fu Hsi. They're the same, they're the equivalent of Thoth or Hermes, or Thoth and Seshat, Hermes or Mercury. They're basically the bringers of knowledge. They taught people how to write, how to speak, how to hunt, how to make metal tools, geometry and astronomy. All these, music is all linked in China to Nuwa and Fu Hsi. And you'll notice their sister, brother, wife and husband, they rebirthed humanity after the Great Flood. Very similar to Thoth and Seshat being sister, brother, wife and husband with one another. But you'll see these astronomical symbols all across them. But it's important to note the compass and the square. And measurements. They're the gods of weights and measure. That's very important linkage as well. So here's one of the classical alchemical European alchemical symbols with rebus, with the alchemical wedding, the sun and the moon coming together, where the male and the female are fused together in one form, and one holds the compass, one holds the square. The twin snakes, coiling snakes of the caduceus of Hermes or Mercury, being the same imagery, gods of astronomy, knowledge, science. Also the I Ching. So, as the story was, Fu Hsi was beside the river. A turtle come up, and on the shapes of the turtle, he come up with the concept of the I Ching. That is also the symbol of, that's a Hermetic, that's a symbol of Hermes, is the shell, and that's because Hermes gave to Apollo a tortoise shell lyre. Now, the Chinese version has 7 strings. Most of the ancient Greek versions have 7 strings. And we see that now, compass and square. So again, this esoteric, this very important sun and moon imagery, astronomy, geometry, arithmetic, compass and square. And I'll put a link up to a video I've done on those as well. So these ancient gods, which really span so much of the world, the ancient world, you could find the same in Sumer and Babylon, but gods of astronomy, writing, geometry, arithmetic, botany, medicine, the gods of weights and measures in science in general. And Hermes Trismegistus, often said to be the literal Thoth, or equivalent of that. We saw Hermes Mercurius Trismegistus, as in the Siena Cathedral. They're the same aspect. So, is Hermes Trismegistus the literal Thoth? Well, okay, so in the next episode I'm going to separate. So we also have Imhotep, famous architect, said to be the inventor of pyramids and stoneworking in Egypt. He was later elevated into a god, essentially the equivalent of Thoth in that sense. But he was also the high priest of Heliopolis, which was called the chief of the observers, and Heliopolis was the primary sanctuary of Seshat, the goddess of knowledge and all those, except now the next, because Imhotep was also a famous healer, Thoth, botany, medicine being connected to that, and in the next one we'll be looking at the Corpus Hermetica, which includes several tracks, include Asclepius. Okay, that's Asclepius, I've missed the S there. Anyway, more to come on that. Cheers, have a good one.